I got back from deployment on a Wednesday. No banners, no welcome signs, no one at the airport, not that I expected any. I caught a ride from Fort Liberty to Charleston in the back of a contractor's van that smelled like gasoline and old socks. My duffel bag was the same one I'd used since my first tour. Still worked. When I walked up to my parents' front porch, Mom opened the door like I was the UPS guy. She blinked. "Oh, Emily, you're back." No hug. No. "How was it?" Just turned around and walked back into the house like she forgot to put something in the oven. I dropped my bag in the hallway. My combat boots left dust on the hardwood floor. Mom looked down at it and said, "Can you wipe that off?" "I just mopped this morning." I haven't even taken my uniform off yet. The house was the same. Same framed photo of Rachel at her college graduation in the hallway, the same absence of anything with my name on it. I'd been deployed 4 times in 10 years. They never framed a single photo. I stopped sending them. Rachel wasn't home. She was busy planning her engagement party, as Mom put it. The theme was modern rustic glam. I asked what that even meant. Mom said I wouldn't get it. I walked upstairs, removed the uniform, folded it tight, and shoved it into the drawer. Put on a plain t-shirt. Just tried to disappear into the house. Like always. At dinner, Mom made salmon with quinoa because Rachel liked it. Even when Rachel wasn't there, the menu followed her. I didn't say much. Dad glanced up once and said, "You still stationed in Georgia?" I'd told him twice this year I'd been reassigned to Fort Liberty. He didn't remember. "North Carolina," I said. Right, he mumbled, returning to his plate. "Still just doing office work?" "Still. Just. Office work." I looked at him for a second. Not long enough to make it awkward. Just enough to make me feel stupid for thinking he'd care. Emily Whitmore. Lieutenant Colonel. 8 months of classified field ops, leading a joint intelligence team across 2 countries. But sure, office work. I said, "Yeah. Pretty much," and stabbed my asparagus. Mom perked up when Rachel FaceTimed in. She propped the phone against the salt shaker and lit up like she was on a game show. "Rach. Show me the ring again. Hold it up higher." I watched my mother squeal over a 2-carat cushion-cut diamond while I sat across the table, wondering how long I could stay without losing my mind. Rachel asked what I'd been up to. Before I could answer, Mom said, "Still working in that office at the base." I didn't correct her. Rachel smiled. "Sounds cuzza." That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by white walls and furniture no one had changed since I was 15. On the shelf, a dusty participation trophy from junior varsity soccer and a candle shaped like a cat I got for Christmas in 2007. No medals. No certificates. No evidence I'd ever left. I opened my laptop, checked in with my CO, responded to 3 flagged messages, and reviewed a pending clearance request from a contractor I'd flagged 2 years ago. The world I belonged to, where people respected the chain of command, performance, and discipline, didn't exist here. Here, I was just the girl who moved away and never quite came back right. I went downstairs around 11 p.m. to get some water. Mom was watching a Rachel TikTok on full volume. Something about branding yourself as an authority in digital reputation. I asked, "You watch all her stuff?" She said, "Of course. Your sister's built quite the image online. She's making a name for herself." I nodded. "Not that your job isn't important too," she added quickly. "It's just, I don't really get what you do. Computers and data, right?" I said. "Something like that." She turned the volume up again. "There's this moment right here where you realize that no matter how many stripes are on your shoulder or what security badge you swipe to enter the building, some people will always see you as a kid who left and never fit in again. You can serve your country, command a unit, and sign off on missions that save lives, but your family thinks you're a glorified secretary. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had your achievements dismissed, especially by those who should know your best moments. And subscribe, because we need to talk about playing it small just to keep the peace." The next morning, Rachel came over. She walked in like she owned the house, which she did, emotionally speaking. She brought samples for centerpieces and fabric swatches for table runners. I'm thinking dusty rose and sage green. What do you think? I said, looks nice. She raised an eyebrow. Wow. Enthusiasm. I just got back from a war zone, Rachel. She laughed. You always say that like it means you're too good for small talk. I didn't reply. She turned to Mom. Can Emily help organize the drink station for the party? I want it all perfect when Grayson's parents arrive. Mom said, that's a great idea. Emily, you don't mind, right? Of course not. I was the reliable one. The background character. The one they asked for favors but never asked about. I said, sure. And that's how I found myself reorganizing cocktail napkins while my sister held up champagne glasses like she was hosting the Oscars. No one cared. I'd just spent 8 months embedded with coalition forces in a classified zone. But they noticed I folded the napkins wrong. And no one, absolutely no one ever asked why I was gone so long. I could have left the party prep to them, but folding napkins was easier than explaining why I hadn't slept properly in weeks. The living room looked like a Pinterest board exploded. White florals, mason jar mock-ups, and 10 different versions of table centerpieces. Holding a clipboard, Rachel paced back and forth and called out instructions like she was leading a board meeting. Emily, can you move those lanterns closer to the bar setup? It needs balance. Balance. Right. I adjusted the lanterns. She gave a tiny nod like I was a trainee doing okay. Grayson hadn't shown up yet, but his parents were due that afternoon. It was crucial they were impressed. Mom kept fluffing pillows and lighting candles like we were hosting royalty. Rachel stressed over matching fonts for place cards. I didn't know fonts could cause meltdowns until I saw her chuck a stack of 2 rounded ones across the room. Can you believe the calligrapher added a heart next to our names? She said, disgusted. This isn't a high school prom. I said nothing. I was too busy figuring out where they wanted the champagne buckets. Dad walked in, glanced around, and said, this looks expensive. Then he walked out. Classic. Rachel decided to brief us all at lunch like a war strategy meeting. So, Grayson's parents are traditional. Think yacht club energy. We need to look pulled together, sophisticated, understated, but not boring. She looked right at me. You'll wear something neutral, right? Not your army stuff. Nothing with patches. I blinked. You mean my uniform? She waved a hand. Yeah, just. I want the focus on the engagement, not on war stories. I wasn't planning to show up in camouflage. She smiled. Great, you get it. Emily Whitmore, Lieutenant Colonel, enemy of color schemes. After lunch, I went outside to catch some air. The backyard was already half set up. Long wooden tables, strings of lights, and floral arrangements probably cost more than my car. Rachel came out behind me, sipping a green juice like she was on a magazine shoot. You've been quiet, she said. I'm tired. She laughed. You always say that. I looked at her. I just got back from active duty. And I've been juggling vendors and RSVPs for a month, she said, dead serious. She meant it, too, like they were the same weight. A war zone and wedding seating. You know, she added, you should really think about what you're doing next. You're not getting any younger. Doing next? Like a real career. Something with growth. Stability. You've been doing this army thing for what, over a decade? 13 years. She nodded like I said, too long. I mean, you're good with detail. You could totally go into HR. Or compliance. Something with structure. The irony nearly knocked me off the porch. I didn't argue. There was no point. I could have told her about the clearances I sign off on, the budgets I handle, and the people who answer to me. But that would have sounded like bragging. Rachel hated it when anyone talked too long about themselves unless it circled back to her. Later that evening, Grayson arrived. First time I'd seen him in person. Tall, polished, firm handshake. He looked like someone who paid attention to grooming tutorials on YouTube. Rachel introduced us like we were strangers. Emily, this is Grayson. Grayson, my sister, Emily. She works in logistics at a military base somewhere. Fort Liberty, I said. He gave a polite smile. Nice to meet you. She basically runs admin, Rachel added quickly. It's a lot of scheduling and reports. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I just held his gaze a second longer than necessary. He shifted slightly. You've got that sharp posture. I can always tell when someone's military. Yeah? I said. Yeah. He nodded. I used to work on a defense project. Civilian contractor. We'd partner with intel units sometimes. Nothing classified. Just protocols, security reviews, stuff like that. Rachel interrupted. Grayson's firm just closed a multi-year deal with a Fortune 500 client. They trust him with millions. Must be nice, I said. He looked at me again, this time more closely. What's your role exactly? Operational oversight. Rachel cut in. She files things, but hey, someone has to, right? She laughed like it was charming. Like undercutting me was a cute family trait. Grayson glanced between us, unsure if he was supposed to laugh too. He didn't. I bet she could run circles around some of the people I've worked with, he said. Rachel rolled her eyes. Sure. Emily's always been good at staying in line. That night, I sat on the back porch alone, watching Rachel pose for Instagram shots with her ring hand front and center. She had a whole system. Turn slightly, raise the glass, tilt the chin. She looked radiant. She always did under good lighting. Inside the house, the family buzzed around her like she was royalty. Dad poured wine. Mom adjusted her hair. A couple of aunts asked if she'd thought about wedding colors yet. No one asked me anything. Not about my deployment, not about where I'd been, not even if I was happy to be home. They didn't ignore me to be cruel. They just didn't think there was anything worth asking. And I didn't correct them. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew what it would turn into another conversation where I'd end up the bad guy for making things about me. I stayed quiet. I stayed small. Because in this house, being useful was safer than being visible. I stayed on the porch until the last light in the kitchen went off, then climbed the stairs like I was sneaking into a house I didn't belong to. My old bedroom smelled like lavender-scented detergent and drywall. The ceiling still had that crack I used to stare at when I was 16, trying to pretend I was somewhere else. I sat on the bed and checked my phone. A few messages from work. A forwarded article from Colonel Cole. One headline, Female Command Leads Successful Evac Under Fire. I was in that photo. Far right, behind the gear. No one here had seen it, no one here ever would. I looked around the room. The same stuffed bear in the corner. Same bookshelf full of young adult paperbacks and SAT prep guides. It was like time had stopped in this room. My whole career, the years of training, deployment, everything I'd survived, none of it made it past that doorway. I thought about showing Mom the article. Then I remembered what happened the last time I tried. It was years ago, over Thanksgiving dinner. I'd just come back from Afghanistan, my third deployment. Still had sand in the seams of my boots. I tried to tell a story, nothing dramatic, just about how the convoy route got rerouted at the last minute and probably saved lives. I wasn't looking for applause. I was just trying to say something real. Dad cut me off mid-sentence. Can we not do war talk over mashed potatoes? Everyone laughed like that was reasonable. Rachel jumped in right after. Let's talk about something fun. I want to show you my new branding project. They passed her Instagram screenshots while I sat there, still holding a forkful of green beans. That was the night I stopped talking about work. The next morning, I got up early and went for a run. It was something I did on base without thinking. But running in my parents' neighborhood felt different, like I was too fast for the sidewalks. The streets felt narrow, and it was as if they didn't want me there. I passed 3 neighbors who all waved like I was visiting from some far-off, barely remembered childhood. When I returned, Rachel was already up, sitting in the dining room with her laptop open and a cold brew in hand. You running 5 miles or escaping something? She said without looking up. Habit, I replied, wiping my face with a towel. She glanced up. You still do the whole 5 a.m. thing? Honestly, sounds like a cult. It's the army. She rolled her eyes. Still. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself some water. Mom came in a minute later, already in a complete outfit, as if attending a charity brunch. "We need extra folding chairs for the party," she said. "Think you could pick some up from Aunt Karen's?" "Sure. Also," she added, "maybe wear something softer when the guests arrive. You know, friendlier." Friendlier. I asked, "What does that mean?" She hesitated. "Just less stern. You always look like you're sizing people up." I didn't answer. They had no idea what it takes to lead a unit. To stand in front of people who expect you to know exactly what to do when bullets are flying. But here, if I didn't smile just right, I was the problem. At lunch, Rachel talked about the seating chart again. "I'm thinking I put Grayson's parents at the center table. My boss and his wife next to them. The rest depends on who's not awkward about gluten." She looked at me. "Don't worry, you'll have a good spot." I raised an eyebrow. She clarified, "You won't be stuck at the end like last Christmas." "Gee, thanks." Grayson walked in just then and overheard the last line. He smiled at me. "I think wherever you sit, you'll make people nervous." Rachel laughed like that was charming. I just said, "Only the ones with something to hide." He paused for half a beat, eyes narrowing like something shifted. I excused myself before the conversation turned into another one of those play nice performances. Upstairs, I changed into jeans and a gray sweater. The kind of thing you wear when you want to be useful but not noticed. I looked in the mirror. No uniform, no rank. Just someone who blended in because it was easier. When I came back down, Rachel handed me a clipboard. "Can you check off deliveries at the side gate? I have florals, drinks, and catering coming in." I took it. "Anything else?" She thought about it. "Yeah. Try not to intimidate the vendors." That was Rachel. A compliment wrapped in a jab served with a smile. Outside, I waited by the gate. One truck. Then another. The last guy, delivering alcohol, looked at me and said, "You military?" I nodded. "Yeah." "You carry yourself like it," he said. Didn't mean anything by it. I signed his delivery sheet. "It's fine." He loaded the boxes and left. I stood there holding the clipboard, listening to laughter inside the house. Someone turned up the music. Glasses clinked. Voices overlapped. Rachel's voice cut through most of them. She knew how to hold attention. I stayed by the gate for a while, watching cars roll by. No one asked if I wanted to come in. I handed off the clipboard without saying much and slipped through the kitchen before anyone could rope me into another small talk marathon. Inside, the dining room was packed. A few aunts and cousins had arrived early, halfway through a white wine bottle. Rachel was mid-story, standing by the table like she was presenting a TED Talk. And I told them, "If your brand doesn't reflect your values, then what are you even doing?" They clapped. Real clapping. Like she'd cured something. I stood by the fridge, pouring water and listening. I wasn't bitter, at least, I told myself. But the difference in energy when she spoke versus when I was in the room wasn't subtle. It was practiced. Rehearsed, familiar. Uncle Pete walked in from the back patio, sunglasses still on indoors, holding a half-empty beer. He hadn't changed in 20 years. "Emily," he boomed, like he'd just remembered I existed. "Still serving?" "Yeah," I said. He clapped me on the shoulder. "That's honest work. Filing reports and whatnot. Builds character." He meant well. I let it slide. Aunt Diane joined in. "Rachel said you work with top-secret documents or something. She said you can't even talk about your job." Rachel cut in before I could respond. "Well, I mean, it's not that intense. She manages spreadsheets and coordinates stuff at the base. It's more logistics than espionage." Everyone laughed. Not a hard laugh, a polite one. The kind people use when unsure but want to keep the tone light. I took a slow sip of water. Grayson sat nearby, watching the room. He didn't say anything. Just observed that he was studying body language. Cousin Melissa asked Rachel about the guest list. She rattled off names like a press release. I was mentioned somewhere between the DJ's girlfriend and our neighbor's daughter who might bring a +1. I'd been gone 8 months, which was my moment of acknowledgement. I wandered to the living room. The only empty seat was beside a floral arrangement blocking half the view. I took it anyway. A kid probably 12 sat on the floor messing with a VR headset. He looked up. "You in the military?" "Yeah," I said. "You ever shoot anybody?" Someone shushed him from the kitchen. He looked at me again. "Do you fly planes?" "Number." "Oh. My friend's uncle is in the Air Force. He flies drones. He says it's basically video games but classified." "That sounds about right." He went back to his headset. I went back to being furniture. Rachel floated through the room again, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. She smiled at everyone like they were paparazzi. At one point, she paused near me, leaned in, and said, "Try not to look so serious. This is a happy event." "I'm just sitting here." "I know, that's the problem." She moved on before I could answer. Someone cued music in the background. Jazz. Low enough to be classy, loud enough to make everyone raise their voices half a pitch. The atmosphere had shifted from prep to party. Jessica showed up around then. My cousin. She was the only family member who checked in on me while I was away. We weren't close growing up, but she was the type who noticed when people got ignored, maybe because it happened to her, too. She hugged me and whispered, "You surviving this circus?" "Define surviving," I said. She laughed. "Same as always." We stood in the kitchen, watching the scene unfold like two people behind the glass of an aquarium. Everyone was moving, smiling, and clinking glasses. The well-dressed chaos of a family that thinks love is measured in event planning. Jessica said, "You look tired." "I am." "Anything you need?" I'm used to being the wallpaper." She looked at me. "You know they're full of it, right? All the stuff they say. The little jabs. The way they ignore what you do." "I know. But you let them." That one stung because it was true. I didn't defend myself. I never had. Not when Dad said I was just chasing structure because I couldn't commit to a real career. Not when Mom called my deployments life detours. Not when Rachel told people I was one of those who peaked early and got stuck. I let them believe it because challenging it felt worse. Because explaining myself always ended in either tension or silence. Because staying quiet became my way of keeping peace even if it meant erasing myself. Jessica didn't push. She knew when to stop. Behind us, Rachel started making a toast. Grayson stood beside her, one hand in his pocket, half smiling like he was holding a secret. I didn't know it then, but that half smile was the first crack. I moved to the far end of the yard, where the string lights didn't quite reach, and nobody bothered to perform. The music was louder now. A mix of pop hits that had been elevated by a string quartet remix. People clapped and swayed in their khaki and linen like they were trying out for a commercial. I stood by a decorative barrel covered in eucalyptus and fake pearls, sipping sparkling water out of a plastic flute. It tasted like soap and effort. From my spot, I watched Rachel glide from group to group like she was hosting a charity gala. Her hair was perfect, her dress probably cost more than my last month's salary, and her smile was on brand. She didn't just want people to be impressed, she wanted them to admire her without asking questions. A woman in a pale pink pantsuit came over, holding a wine glass and a too-tight smile. "You must be Rachel's sister." "Unfortunately, yes," I said before I could stop myself. She laughed like I was joking. "She talks about you all the time." "I bet." "She says you work for the government." "I do." "Oh, that's so mysterious." Her voice went up half an octave. "Like the FBI?" "More boring," I said. She smiled wider and nodded like she understood, but I could see her eyes glazing over. The second someone waved at her from the mimosa station, she floated away like a leaf in a breeze. I stayed where I was. Grayson finally joined the crowd, fresh off some meeting or errand Rachel had sent him on. He looked sharp but a little distracted. When he saw me, he nodded, then hesitated before walking over. "Hey," he said. "Hey. This whole thing is a lot." "Welcome to the Whitmore production," I said. He chuckled. "You don't seem too into it." "Do I look like someone who enjoys theme parties and pre-approved Spotify playlists?" Fair. He leaned against the barrel beside me. I heard you're based at Fort Liberty? Yeah. What do you do there? Operational oversight. He squinted a little. That sounds vague. It's supposed to. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Rachel said you work in admin. Rachel says a lot of things. He glanced toward the crowd. You ever think about leaving? Like getting out of the army? I've thought about it. And? Still in uniform. Fair enough. Someone called his name. He gave me a quick nod and disappeared into the crowd. I watched him go. He didn't walk like someone fully settled into where he was. Rachel stepped up onto a small riser near the center of the yard. She tapped a spoon against her glass and launched into a speech. I just want to thank everyone for coming. It means the world to Grayson and me to have all of you here, family, friends, coworkers, influencers, and everyone in between. People clapped. She held up her champagne. Some people lead multi-million-dollar PR campaigns, she gestured to herself with a playful smirk. And some people, she turned toward me, manage files at a military base. Laughter. Light, awkward, and just uncomfortable enough to sting. I didn't flinch. I didn't even look away. I took a sip of my flat drink and waited. Grayson looked at her, then at me. Something shifted. Rachel continued like she hadn't noticed. But in all seriousness, we're grateful to share this with all of you. It's going to be a beautiful future. More clapping. People raised glasses. Rachel descended from the riser like she was finishing a runway walk. Jessica came over and leaned in. That was unnecessary. Par for the course, I said. She loves the sound of her own success. It's loud, I replied. Dinner started. Long tables, pre-assigned seating, and name cards with gold calligraphy. I was placed near the end between a woman who only talked about her labradoodle and a guy who once worked in real estate and now taught meditation online. I ate slowly, mostly pushing food around the plate. I kept one ear on Rachel, holding the court at the center of the table, describing some client's nightmare as if it were a war story. She even used the phrase "we were under fire from 3 directions," which was cute, considering the worst thing she's probably dodged was a call from a dissatisfied investor. The real kicker came when Dad raised his glass and said, "To Rachel and Grayson, may your partnership be as strong as your campaigns and contracts." Mom followed up with, "We're so proud. Rachel's always been driven. She knows how to lead." I said nothing. I didn't need to. No one was looking my way. The only person who noticed was Grayson. He caught my eye from across the table. There was something in his face recognition, confusion, maybe both. He raised his glass. Just slightly. I didn't return it. Then he asked. Loud enough for everyone near us to hear, "Emily, what exactly do you do at the base?" Forks paused. Rachel froze mid-sip. A few heads turned. I set my glass down and looked him dead in the eye. Operational oversight, intelligence coordination, clearance review. I'm a lieutenant colonel. Someone's knife clinked against a plate. A few people blinked like they'd misheard. Rachel spoke first. You're what? Lieutenant Colonel Emily Whitmore. U.S. Army. Grayson leaned back. His face went pale. Wait. Whitmore? Baghdad unit. Clearance 027B. You signed off on my denial. I did. Rachel looked between us, confused and increasingly alarmed. You knew each other? She asked. Grayson didn't answer. He was too busy staring at me like he'd just solved a puzzle and didn't like the picture. Rachel blinked like she was trying to restart a frozen screen, then stood up so fast her chair scraped hard against the stone patio. You're joking, she said. Too loud, too fast. I didn't answer. Grayson was still looking at me, his face now a mix of disbelief and something else, regret, maybe, or dread. You're not serious, Rachel continued, her voice tightening. Lieutenant Colonel? Since when? 3 years, I said. Grayson turned to her. She's not joking. I remember now. The clearance request. Iraq. I had to restructure my entire contract after that. Rachel looked at him like he'd just betrayed her on live television. You're telling me you knew? I didn't, he said, shaking his head. Not until now. He pointed toward me. Emily Whitmore. She was listed on the official denial. We never met face to face. I only saw the signature, and the comments direct, brutal, accurate. No one else wrote like that. Rachel took a step back, eyes wide, breath shallow. You ruined his contract? I flagged inconsistencies in his financial disclosures and a prior disciplinary write-up that hadn't been properly reported. That's protocol. Rachel turned to our parents. Did you know about this? Dad looked stunned. Mom looked like someone had unplugged her brain. You said you worked in admin. Mom whispered like I'd lied to her personally. I said I worked in operations. You stopped asking after that. The silence stretched so tight it started to buzz. Forks paused midair. Drinks were set down without a sound. Uncle Pete, ever the diplomat, broke the tension. Well, he said, clearing his throat, I always said honest admin work builds character. Grayson looked at him like he was trying not to laugh. Rachel crossed her arms. This is insane. You let us believe you were basically a secretary. Who does that? I didn't let you believe anything. I just stopped correcting you. That's the same thing. No, I said, it's not. She scoffed. You waited until my engagement party to drop this? Are you really that petty? I didn't flinch. You mocked me in front of your fiancé and half the family. I gave you the courtesy of the truth. Grayson sat down slowly, still looking at me like he was processing a file he thought had been closed. I can't believe this, Rachel said, pacing now. You always make everything about you. I said nothing. Jessica spoke up from the far end. I went to her swearing in. It was in every military newsletter. They published it in Defense Weekly. Mom blinked. You were promoted 3 years ago and didn't say a word? I tried once. You asked me to wait until after Rachel finished her story about the PR award, then you never circled back. Dad finally said something. Emily, why didn't you just tell us? I stopped trying to prove myself to people who already made up their minds. No one moved. A single wine glass tipped near the center of the table rolled slightly and stopped. Rachel's expression twisted from shock to fury. I should have known. You were always waiting for a moment like this. Quiet little Emily with her passive-aggressive bombs. This isn't passive-aggressive, I said calmly. It's just the truth. You don't like how it sounds because it doesn't orbit around you. Grayson stood again. Rachel. She snapped at him. Don't. He froze. You knew. She jabbed a finger at him like it was a weapon, eyes wide with something between panic and betrayal. You knew. Rachel hissed, louder now, her voice cutting across the quiet table. Grayson looked at her, calm but shaken. I told you. I didn't connect the dots until she said her rank. Then why are you just standing there, like she's the victim? I'm not standing anywhere, he said. I'm trying to process the fact that the woman I'm about to marry has been publicly mocking her own sister, who turns out to outrank most of the people I've ever worked with. She let us believe she was nothing. I never said I was nothing, I replied. Rachel turned toward me again, voice rising. You let me talk about my work like it mattered more. You let me make a fool of myself in front of everyone. No, I said. You did that all on your own. Although, Jessica stood up like she was about to intervene, then sat back down when she realized Rachel wasn't ready to listen. Across the table, Uncle Pete cleared his throat again as if he wanted to say something diplomatic but wisely decided against it. Rachel laughed, short and bitter. You were always like this. Quiet, smug, calculating. Sitting in corners, waiting for a chance to make the rest of us look bad. Or maybe, I said evenly. I was just tired of fighting to be taken seriously by people who don't care to ask questions. Grayson spoke up again. Your file, when I saw the name on my clearance denial, I thought it was a man. You wrote like someone who'd been at war for years. I remember reading your comments out loud to a colleague and saying, whoever this is, they don't mess around. You're right, I said. I don't. Rachel turned to him again, voice sharper now. And that's supposed to impress you? It's supposed to make me think, he replied. And I'm thinking. Dad stood up slowly. Okay, let's all take a breath. Mom interrupted, her voice cracking. Why wouldn't you tell us? Why keep something like that a secret from your own family? I didn't keep it a secret, I said. You just never listened long enough to hear it. You should have pushed, she snapped. I did. Once. At Christmas. Right after you finished bragging about Rachel's company being featured in that article. That was a big moment, she whispered. I know, that's why I let it stay big. Silence fell again. This time, it felt heavier. Rachel finally said, "This is still my engagement party." Yeah, I said. And I stayed quiet through most of it. Through every joke, every sideways comment, every time you pretended my job was some desk gig in a cubicle. But then your fiancé asked me a question. And I answered. Grayson looked like he wanted to say more. But Rachel spun away from the table, heels clacking against the stone patio like gunfire. Everyone watched her go. Not in concern, just stunned that, for once, she wasn't the one controlling the room. Grayson stayed where he was, staring at the empty spot she'd left behind. Mom sat back down slowly as her spine collapsed. Dad poured himself another inch of wine without looking at anyone. Jessica picked up her napkin and started folding it, not to be neat, just to do something with her hands. Across the table, someone whispered, "Lieutenant Colonel?" The guy beside them nodded, murmuring, "That's what she said." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't apologize. Grayson finally broke the silence. Bradford Pharmaceuticals. That was your case, wasn't it? I nodded. I sat in that hearing. You didn't even look at us. I was doing my job. He gave a short laugh. No, you were performing surgery. You took apart 100 pages of documentation like you wrote them yourself. I read the entire file, I said. Twice. He nodded, slow and deliberate. I never stood a chance. Rachel's voice came from inside the house. Not yelling, but sharp words muffled by the walls. She's probably calling her best friend, maybe her wedding planner, maybe both. Jessica leaned toward me. You okay? I'm not sure yet. You didn't do anything wrong. I know. End quote. The catering staff moved around the edges of the scene, trying to pretend nothing happened. Replacing glasses, rearranging napkins, resetting the rhythm. The sun dipped lower. Lights flicked on above us. Warm glow, soft shadows, everything picture perfect again, except no one looked at Rachel's engagement ring anymore. Grayson turned to me one last time. Why didn't you say something sooner? Because no one ever asked. Oh. I stood up without saying a word and walked toward the house, not because I had something to prove, just because I refused to shrink back into my chair like I used to. The hallway was quiet, dim, and cold, the way our house always felt once the laughter was outside and the lights were off. I passed the mirror near the entryway and caught my reflection. My hair was a little out of place. My face looked calm, too calm. I looked like someone who'd just finished something instead of someone in the middle. I went to the guest bathroom, locked the door behind me, and exhaled. It wasn't adrenaline anymore. It was a kind of silence I hadn't felt in years. Not the kind you keep to protect others. The kind that comes after truth does its job. I ran the tap. Splashed water on my face. Then dried off with the towel Rachel had embroidered with R and G in gold, because branding starts in the linen closet. A knock came at the front door. Muffled. 3 short raps. I waited. Nobody answered. It came again. When I stepped out, I saw Grayson standing in the foyer, staring at the door like he was weighing something. You expecting someone? I asked. He turned, startled. Not unless Rachel hired a private security team since dinner. Another knock. This time, it is more deliberate. I walked past him and opened it. Standing there was Colonel Cole. Combat boots, pressed uniform, the whole deal. Like he'd just stepped out of a base and into a backyard soap opera. Colonel? He blinked. Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore, he said with a nod. Sorry to crash the party. Grayson stepped back instinctively. I stepped outside with him, pulling the door halfway closed behind me. Is something wrong? I asked. Not wrong, he said. Just personal. He reached into his pocket and handed me an envelope. Heavy paper. Handwritten label. My stomach dropped a little. What is this? Recommendation. For promotion. It's unofficial. But the committee met early. You're the frontrunner. I stared at him. Sir, with all due respect, why bring this here? He hesitated. Because I know what today is. And I figured, if there was ever a day you needed to be reminded who the hell you are, it's this one. My throat tightened. Also, he added, your name came up for a civilian advisory post in DC, a policy think tank. It'd mean transitioning out of active duty. Leaving the army? He nodded. When you're ready, you'd have options. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. I'll leave you with that, he said. And Whitmore, don't let anyone in there dim what you've built. He turned and walked off like it was just another Thursday. I stayed on the porch a minute longer, watching the taillights disappear down the driveway. When I returned, Grayson was still standing where I left him. You okay? He asked. I think so. Who was that? Just someone who sees more than what's on the surface. He nodded slowly. Wish I could say the same about everyone in this house. We stood in silence for a beat. Then he asked, would it be inappropriate for me to say I'm impressed? I gave him a look. Depends how much longer you plan on being engaged to my sister. He half laughed. Fair. The front door opened again. Jessica came in, holding her purse and her car keys. You leaving already? I asked. She shrugged. Rachel's crying in the laundry room. Your mom's pretending it's a stomachache. I figured I'd leave before someone asks me to mop up emotional shrapnel. Smart. She walked over and glanced down at the envelope in my hand. What's that? Possibly the weirdest promotion notice I've ever received. She raised an eyebrow. You gonna take it? I don't know yet. You should. I might. She nodded, then leaned in and hugged me. You did good. Did I? You didn't throw a single punch and still knocked half this family on their ass. That's a win. I smiled. A real one, for once. As she left, I went back into the kitchen. The crowd had thinned, plates scraped, glasses half full and abandoned. Someone was gathering up napkins. Rachel still hadn't come out. Mom gave me a look like she wasn't sure whether to apologize or double down. She chose neither. Just quietly handed me a tub of leftovers and muttered, take this. You'll need something warm. I took it. Not because I wanted the food, but because it was the closest thing to peace we'd managed in years. Grayson came into the kitchen a moment later. He looked exhausted. He asked, can we talk? I hesitated. You sure you're not already getting enough feedback from this side of the family? He gave a dry laugh. This might be the only honest conversation I get tonight. I motioned to the back door. Then let's talk where nobody's pretending. I pushed the door open with my elbow and stepped out into the night, the air cooler than it had been all day, like the house had been holding its breath and finally let it go. We stood by the back railing in silence for a few seconds. The garden lights buzzed faintly. The party sounds had finally died down to nothing but a few scattered voices inside and the clink of silverware being gathered. Grayson leaned on the wooden rail and exhaled hard. I'm not sure what's worse, he said. Finding out who you are, or realizing how much I didn't know to begin with. I stayed quiet. He wasn't trying to flatter me, and I wasn't in the mood for comfort. He said, you ever meet someone and realize they're not the person you thought, but not because they changed, just because you were too lazy to pay attention? That ever happen with Rachel? I asked. He smirked at that. She's exactly who I thought she was. I just kept pretending it didn't matter. The lights inside the house cast just enough of a glow for me to see the lines on his face. I do not regret it. It is like awareness finally catching up to denial. He shifted his weight. Can I ask you something, Emily? Sure. When you denied my clearance 3 years ago. Number. It was technical. Your company was sloppy. Your records didn't match up. You cut corners and expected a rubber stamp. He nodded. That's what I figured. But it still stung. Good. Maybe it kept something worse from happening. He looked at me, really looked this time. I underestimated you. You and half the table. Rachel says you always made her feel small. I turned to him. Rachel made herself small by needing everyone else to shrink. He didn't argue. I didn't want this, I added. Not tonight. Not this way. But when people write your story for you long enough, eventually you have to take the pen back. He nodded again, slower this time. You wrote yours in ink, he said. And in sand, and in dust, and in heat. Every place your fiancé's never had to sweat in. That one hit. He didn't deny it. She's ambitious, he said. She's also exhausting. But you're something else. You walk into a room like it owes you nothing. I didn't even see it until tonight. Then you weren't looking, I said. He gave a small laugh. You're right. There was a long pause. He didn't move. Neither did I. Finally, he asked, would it be insane to say I feel closer to you in one night than I've ever felt to her? Only if you plan to say it out loud in front of her. He smiled without joy. I don't know what I'm doing, he said. I thought I had it all lined up. Career, image, marriage. But tonight it all feels hollow. Hollow is loud when you stop pretending it's enough. He ran a hand through his hair. I need to rethink a lot. That's your call. He turned to me. What would you do if you were me? I didn't blink. I'd stop mistaking comfort for love. He didn't speak after that. A breeze moved through the yard, rustling the trees. A plate clattered in the sink somewhere inside, followed by Rachel's voice, distant, muffled, irritated. Grayson asked, you ever feel like you've outgrown your own family? All the time. How do you deal with it? By remembering that blood isn't the same as bond, and that obligation isn't loyalty. He looked down, then back at me. You'd be a terrifying therapist. Lucky for me, I shoot straighter than I counsel. He laughed again this time, not forced. I checked the time. Almost midnight. The house was still humming, but it was running out of steam. Just like the narrative Rachel had wrapped around us for so long. He said, I should probably check on her. I should probably disappear before she sees us talking like this. He didn't stop me. As I turned to head inside, he said, Emily? Yeah? I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know this tonight was the first time I saw you. I gave him a quick nod. Then maybe you should start looking at who you're planning to marry. And I left him standing there, exactly where he needed to be. I slipped through the hallway and grabbed my coat off the banister, ignoring the low buzz of voices from the laundry room. It wasn't a dramatic exit. No slammed doors. No goodbye speeches. I quietly decided I was done playing a part I never auditioned for. I walked out the front door and into the driveway, where 3 SUVs and what looked like a rented shuttle van were boxed in my car. I climbed into the front seat and sat briefly, hands on the wheel, engine off. My phone lit up 2 missed calls from Mom, one from an unknown number, and a new text from Jessica. Proud of you. Drive safe. That was overdue. No traffic, no music, no adrenaline. Just silence, finally mine. I pulled out slowly, careful not to scrape the neighbor's landscaping rocks, and headed down the street, past the trimmed hedges and white picket fences. Past the illusion. When I got home, I changed into sweats, poured a glass of water, and sat on my couch like I hadn't just detonated years of family denial in one night. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't revenge. It was clean, like wiping fog off a mirror and seeing your face without apology. 10 minutes later, a knock hit my door. Not a soft one. Not hesitant. A knock that knew precisely what it was doing. I opened it without checking the peephole. Rachel. No makeup. Hair up in a messy bun. Red eyes. Hoodie that didn't look like hers. Can I come in? I didn't move. She added, I'm not here to fight. I stepped aside. She walked in like someone who didn't want to be seen, even by me. We sat on the couch in silence. I waited. She stared at her hands. I'm not good at this, she finally said. Then don't pretend to be. She nodded and swallowed hard. Why didn't you ever just tell me? I did. You just didn't listen. No, I mean, why didn't you make me listen? Because every time I tried, you made it about you. So I stopped trying. She looked up, eyes glassy. I thought I was the successful one. You are. But not at the cost of erasing me. I didn't know that's what I was doing. You didn't care enough to find out. That one landed. She didn't argue. I didn't mean to humiliate you, she said quietly. Yeah, you did. But not because you hate me. Because you needed me small. Ugh. She breathed in, held it, and let it out slowly. You know what's messed up? I'm proud of you. I always have been. But saying that out loud felt like admitting I'm not enough. I sat back. You've always been enough. You just built your worth on being the best, and I didn't play along. She nodded. I made you invisible. And then got mad when people noticed you. I didn't respond. There was nothing else to say. She rubbed her face. Grayson's not speaking to me. That's between you and him. He said he doesn't know who I really am. Do you? That shut her up. I came here to say I'm sorry, she said. Not for the party, or the jokes, or even the years of minimizing. I'm sorry for not seeing you. For needing you to disappear so I could shine. I watched her sit with that. For once, she didn't rush to fix it with words or spin it into a redemption arc. I said, thank you. That's the first honest thing you've said to me in a long time. I started therapy last month, she said. That surprised me. Why? Because I was exhausted by my own performance. And I didn't know how to stop. I nodded. Keep going. She stood up slowly. I won't take more of your night. I just needed you to hear it from me. She paused at the door. I want to be someone who earns your respect, not just your silence. And then she left. I closed the door and stood there for a moment, hands still on the knob, letting it settle. Not forgiveness. Not closure. But truth. And that was enough for tonight. I left the hallway light on and returned to the kitchen, where the fridge hummed louder than anything inside my head. I sat at the counter and opened the tub of leftovers Mom had handed me like a white flag. Cold mashed potatoes resembling turkey and cranberry sauce that looked like regret. I didn't touch any of it. Instead, I stared out the window at the empty street and thought about what it meant to stop hiding not from the world, but from the version of myself I'd been shrinking for years. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Dad. I didn't answer. But then a second buzz came. Voicemail. I gave it a second, then tapped play. His voice was calm, hesitant. Hey, Emily. I know it's late. I guess I didn't realize how much I missed. Or how little I knew. I'm proud of you. Always was. I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. I hit delete, not out of spite. I just didn't need to replay it. 10 minutes later, another knock. I opened the door and found no one. But there was an envelope on the welcome mat, handwritten again. I opened it right there. Inside, a printout of an official nomination memo. Lieutenant Colonel Emily Whitmore was recommended for promotion to full colonel. Plus a note, unsigned. Let them underestimate you, then let them watch you win. That. I stood there momentarily, the paper cold in my hand, then folded it and slid it into the kitchen drawer next to the batteries and random coupons. By morning, I'd gotten 9 text messages. 3 were from extended relatives. All said the same thing in slightly different fonts. We had no idea. 2 were apologies. 4 were curious. None of them mattered. What mattered was that I finally answered Jessica's message with, thanks. I feel like I finally cleared a room without saying a word. Oh, it. She responded. You cleared a room by saying the only word that mattered. Later that week, Mom invited me to lunch. Neutral ground. A cafe halfway between her yoga studio and the only place I ever agreed to meet her that didn't have reservations 3 weeks out. She looked tired. Less put together than usual. The kind of tiredness that comes from facing something you spent years ignoring. She ordered tea. I got coffee. We discussed the weather, traffic, and whether Rachel was still engaged. Then she said, "You've always been strong." I didn't respond. She added, "I don't know why I didn't see it." I looked at her. "You saw it. You just didn't want to believe it." She nodded slowly, like swallowing something sour. "I thought protecting Rachel meant downplaying you. So she could shine." I stirred my coffee. "You didn't protect her. You disabled her." And you erased me in the process. Exchange. Her eyes welled up, but no tears fell. You deserved better. Yeah, I said. I did. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't pivot to a compliment, and for once, she didn't talk about Rachel. That, in itself, was enough. When we left, she hugged me. Not long. Not dramatic, but real. I went back to base the next day. Quietly. No announcements, no extra shine. But the hallway chatter stopped when I walked past. A couple of my officers stood a little straighter. Someone said, "Ma'am," without sarcasm. They'd read the notice. One of the younger staffers asked if I'd turned down a defense consulting firm's offer last year. I just smiled. When I walked into my office, there was a sticky note on my desk. About time they saw what we've known since your second year, Major L. I stuck it inside my locker. That afternoon, I ran drills, cleaned reports, took a call from someone in DC who used words like advisory committee and civilian transition path. Oh, I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just said, send it over. The rest could wait. I tossed my duffel onto the bed, sat beside it, and stared at the stack of unopened envelopes I'd avoided since last month. Most were policy memos. One was from the Department of Defense. Another looked like a holiday card from a colonel's wife who thought we were closer than we were. But the top one, plain white, no return address, caught my eye. Inside, an invitation. Civilian Strategic Advisory Panel, Defense Affairs Committee. Washington, D.C. 6-month contract. Optional extension. Full security clearance, full pay. No uniform is required. I held it like it weighed more than the folders I'd carried through war zones. This wasn't just a job, it was a door. Behind me, the television was on low volume. Some news panels talked about transitioning female officers, like we were a social experiment. I muted it. I stared at the letter again. It was everything I said I didn't need. Recognition. Validation. A seat at a bigger table. But this time, no one would mistake me for someone's assistant. There'd be no Rachel. No champagne toasts followed by sideways insults. Just policy, strategy, and a chance to reshape something that had tried to contain me for years. I set it down and reached for my phone. Jessica answered on the second ring. You sound like someone who just found money in a coat pocket, she said. Got an offer. All. D.C. Yeah. What's the hesitation? It's not the job, it's what it means. Which is that maybe I'm finally allowed to stop proving myself. She paused, then said, You were allowed the whole time, you just didn't know it. I exhaled. She added, If you don't take the job because it's not right, fine. But if you don't take it because you think you owe your silence to someone else's comfort, don't be stupid. Thanks, Jess. For calling you stupid? For knowing when to. I hung up and went back to the letter. I wasn't scared of the work. I wasn't scared of starting over. I was scared of what it would feel like to want something for myself without an apology. I got dressed, grabbed a folder, and walked out the door. A drive always helped. As I turned onto the highway, I thought about the versions of myself I'd had to kill off to get here. The girl who whispered her job title so people wouldn't feel threatened. The woman who smiled politely through family dinners, even as her stomach turned. The soldier outperformed 10 men in a unit and still got asked if she needed help parking. At a red light, my phone buzzed again. It was Rachel. Rachel, he's moving out. Rachel. I think it's over. Rachel. I'm not asking for advice, just wanted you to know. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, typed, I hope you figure out what version of yourself you want to keep. She didn't reply. I didn't need her to. The sun started setting over the ridge, casting long shadows over the road. I pulled into a gas station, grabbed water, and stood outside the car. 2 kids rode past on bikes. A guy walked out of the mini-mart with a 6-pack. Nothing profound, just everyday life, not built on performance or damage control. I looked back at the letter through the windshield. I'd been handed 2 paths. Stay and keep proving my worth to people who never looked closely, or go and belong in a room where no one needed a reintroduction. I got back in the car and drove toward the future that didn't ask me to dim a single part of myself. I rolled the window down as I merged onto the interstate, letting the wind hit my face like a reset button I didn't know I needed. The city lights were behind me now. The skyline shrunk in the rearview mirror like a stage I'd finally stepped off. I wasn't heading somewhere for the first time in years because I had to prove something to someone. I wasn't reporting in, shrinking down, or showing up with a polite grin and a folder full of credentials. I was just moving forward. I didn't have music on. Didn't need it. Around exit 19, I saw a billboard that said, "Live bigger than their expectations." It was for a mattress company, which made it kind of ridiculous. Still, I laughed out loud. I couldn't have written it better myself. I pulled into a rest stop about an hour later, not because I needed to, but because I wanted a moment to stand still. An old couple was sitting at a picnic table, sharing a sandwich. No one was on their phone. No one looked like they were performing for a photo. They looked content. Untouched by the kind of comparison and competition, my family became a sport. I walked past them with a nod, and the woman smiled at me like she knew something I hadn't yet. I sat under a flickering light on a bench and pulled out the DC letter again. Still unsigned. Still full of potential. I folded it back up, but not before writing something on the back. This time, I'm choosing for me. No explanations. No guilt. Back in the car, I checked my phone one last time. A voicemail from Grayson. I debated playing it, then hit delete without listening. He wasn't mine to fix. Neither was Rachel. And neither one got to be the reason I did or didn't chase something I'd earned the hard way. Another hour down the highway, I stopped for gas. As I pumped, a woman in her late 20s walked over. Army tee, no rank, but the posture was unmistakable. "You Whitmore?" she asked. He blinked. "Yeah. I served under Major Lennox. He used to quote you all the time." I raised an eyebrow. "Quote me?" She nodded. "Said you told him once, respect is earned in silence, but kept in action. He made us write it on the back of our ID tags, said it came from someone who never needed a room to know her name to command it." I felt something shift in my chest, something solid and still. "Tell Lennox I said thank you," I replied. "I will. Good luck in DC, Colonel." She walked away like it was nothing. Like she hadn't just handed me the exact push I didn't know I still needed. I watched her disappear into a beat-up sedan, then looked at my reflection in the gas station window. Windblown, tired, steady. No rank on display. No medals in sight. Just me. I climbed back into the car, started the engine, and drove not to run or prove but to arrive. I reached the city's edge just as the sky turned that pale morning blue, the kind that felt like a blank page instead of just another day. DC didn't greet me with banners or recognition. Just traffic. A stoplight that blinked like it had better places to be. A coffee shop that smelled like burnt ambition. And for once, I didn't mind any of it. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a landing. The panel's temporary office was in a federal building that smelled like paper, disinfectant, and decades of overthinking. I passed through security, flashed my ID, and rode the elevator up to the 10th floor with 3 other people in suits who all looked like they were rehearsing their opinions in the mirror. When the doors opened, a staffer greeted me. "Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore?" "Just Emily," I said. She smiled like she'd been warned I wasn't into the ceremony. She led me down the hall, past a row of glass-walled offices. Inside, a few men were already seated, flipping through briefing folders like they'd been born with them in hand. We entered a small conference room. No nameplates. Just 6 chairs, a carafe of burnt coffee, and a tablet in front of each seat. I sat. No one looked surprised. No one asked what I was doing there. One man glanced at me and nodded. "We're glad you accepted." So was I. The meeting started. No hand-holding, no introductions, just policy, conflict projections, defense allocations, and diplomatic strategy. I spoke once. Twice. By the 3rd comment, 2 people started taking notes. By the end, one of the senior advisors said, "Let's flag that and have Emily draft a response for review." Just like that. No resume reading. No speech. No performance. I walked out an hour later into a hallway that felt less like a battlefield than every family dinner I'd ever survived. That night, I got dinner alone. A diner 2 blocks from my temporary apartment. Vinyl seats. Stale fries. A waitress named Dee called everyone Han. She refilled my coffee and said, "Rough day? Number." She nodded. "That's better." I looked around the room. No one here knew me. No one cared what title I held. And for once, I didn't need to shrink or swell to fit a space I'd already earned. I paid in cash. Left a tip bigger than the meal. As I walked back, I saw a little girl on a scooter skid to a stop in front of her dad, proudly holding up a rock like she'd found treasure. He knelt, listened as it mattered, and said, "That's amazing, kiddo." He didn't interrupt her, didn't redirect her. He just let her shine. I kept walking, the air cool and real, the way truth always feels when no one's trying to rewrite it. Back in the apartment, I sat on the floor. No television. No background noise, just me. The invitation was still on the table. But it didn't feel like an invitation anymore. It felt like a beginning for which I didn't need permission. I didn't text Rachel, or Grayson, or anyone who'd only known me in pieces. But I did text Jessica. Me, I didn't change, I just stopped asking for permission. "Jessica. About damn time." I laughed. Then I stood, poured a glass of water, and looked out the window at a city that didn't owe me a single thing because I didn't owe it an explanation. I didn't need to justify who I was, where I worked, or how I got there. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. Or the overlooked one. Or the one who probably answers phones. I was Emily Whitmore. Lieutenant Colonel. Strategist. Judge of character. Maker of my name. And for once, that name didn't need defending. You spend years thinking you must prove something to your family, partner, and colleagues. But at some point, you realize the only person who needs to see you is you. I didn't tell this story for applause or sympathy. I told it because maybe someone out there's still sitting at that dinner table, being called the quiet one, hiding their wins so others feel bigger. Maybe they've been made small for so long that they started to believe it. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't need to shrink so others can stretch. Let them misjudge you. Let them scoff. Then let them watch you own the space they said you didn't belong in. If this story hit a nerve, leave a comment. And subscribe because we don't play small here. Not anymore. If you're into real, grounded revenge stories and the kind of family drama that hits a little too close to home, subscribe. We're not here for fairy tales. We're here for the moments when people stop taking the hits and start taking back their power. More stories are coming that'll make you feel seen, maybe even fired up. Don't miss them.